Okay, so I give the first speech. So is everyone ready?
Yes.
Okay. I stand in affirmation of the resolution which states resolve the U.S. government should persecute the production and distribution of fake news. And I offer the two following contention. First is that fake news leads to public health crises. So we might look at fake news as a buzzword used by Trump. However, we see that the implications of the distribution of fake news go much, much deeper and affect the lives of thousands and thousands of people. So the first example I would like to give is the anti-vaccine movement. So it has been well established that vaccines have saved millions and millions of lives across the world because diseases that were once death sentences can now be preventable with a single shot. However, people who engage in fake news have been spreading the lie for decades now that vaccines somehow cause autism. And due to this lie, I looked at the Jenny McCarthy bodycount.com and I saw that over 9,000 children have died from preventable diseases, and over 152,000 in preventable diseases have happened as a result of anti-vaccination. So it is clear that fake news is not just a buzzword. And then I would also look at the present day where we see people who think that wearing masks in public is some sort of a government conspiracy. And this has been forwarding the pandemic, making the United States a hotspot for coronavirus, even though we could have simply prevented this by a large amount if we simply didn't look at fake news and wore masks. And my second contention is that fake news divides us. When we look at everything that opposes us as malicious, we view everything as conspiracy, as fake news often does, then we come to think that everybody is our enemy. And when we engage in this mindset, we become more divided as a country. So instead of looking at fake news and viewing everybody as our enemy, I urge that we unite and look at the truth together. And that is why I urge a vote in affirmation.
Okay. So is it the fake news itself that's divisive, or divisiveness causes fake news?
Um, I guess you could say that it goes both ways, but it is clear that the fake news only makes the divisiveness worse and worse.
And also, how would one define fake news?
Um, I'd say, like, based on my case, I'd just say if you look at the anti-vaccine example or anti-mask example, I'd say just something that isn't factually correct,
All right, and
or empirically correct.
so this revolution would give the government the power to decide what is and is not fake news. So our current government, for example, Donald Trump, do you think he has accurate beliefs on what is and is not fake news?
I would not say so.
All right, that's time. Thank you. Okay, my speech. Everyone ready?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I would first like to explain what fake news is, then deliver my primary contention, and then address some possible arguments against my case. So, fake news is defined as false news stories, often of a sensational nature, created to widely shared or distributed for the purpose of generating revenue. So, my first contention is that the government deciding what is and is not fake news is extremely dangerous, and I go no further than our current example of the President Donald Trump declaring that masks and information about their supportiveness was fake news. If this were to be persecuted by our current government, then so much danger would come of it. And this is a current government, not not even thinking about what could happen and what kind of propaganda could be propped up through supporting such persecution of what would be considered fake news by the government. It's also worth noting that knowledge is indeed shifting, and so persecuting stuff that is fake news would be very dangerous, as scientific studies are constantly being shifted. So somebody propping up like an old scientific study that may not be accurate could be considered fake news, even though that scientific belief is not currently held. It's also worth noting that this assignment of fake news within my definition noted that it's sensational in nature. However, this could be used to censor fringe beliefs that should be considered and not be censored. And so for these reasons, I believe that you should vote against censorship and the government deciding what is and is not fake news, and vote in favor of negation.
Start crossfire now. Okay, so under this resolution, would Donald Trump be the only one that would be in charge of censoring fake news, or would be outsourced to other branches or departments of his government?
So he would not be the only one. However, as we can currently see, like so many people just do whatever Trump says out of fear. And also, it's worth noting that like it may not happen now that the rest of the government would be completely corrupt to this. However, sometime in the near future, we might have a scenario where other government officials are corrupt.
Okay. And also, does banishing fake news involve only censoring beliefs that you don't like, or does it actually involve eliminating articles that are just factually untrue?
So there's kind of a strange line here nowadays, especially with the whole like alternative facts thing going on. We're at a point where like the factual evidence is oftentimes disputed between people with different political affiliations. So a lot of times censorship would occur of just stuff you don't like.
Okay, thank you. I would like to begin this speech by providing a better definition of fake news, which is that it must be factually untrue based off the examples of anti vaccination and um, anti-mask wearing that I gave in my examples. Both of these examples are factually untrue, and even though um, if something can be sensational, if it is completely within the bounds of truths, it should not be censored under fake news because that would lead to its obvious problems. So now I'm going to address my opponent's points, which he says that this is going to be a dangerous tool used for the government. First, we have to realize that even though he gives the example of Trump, we have to realize that Trump is not going to be our permanent leader. So we have to look at the long-term effects of this, and in the long term there is going to be better public health and better unity as a result of prosecuting the propagation of fake news. And then first, we even during the Trump presidency, we see that Trump isn't going to be the only one controlling what is and what isn't fake news. So we all know that as a president, Trump isn't actually the most productive person, so he wouldn't have the ability to censor all these articles, and he wouldn't actually have that much of the effect. It would be the government department that is in charge of looking at fake news that would actually have an impact. And if the government should use the strict definition of fake news that I just provided, then there shouldn't be a problem with banishing these opinions that are actually factually true. And then finally, I would like to touch on the topic of fringe beliefs. We have to realize that fringe beliefs are only fringe beliefs because they are not popular ideas within themselves. So they have to rely on the use of fake news and alternative facts to even have an audience at all. If these were ideas grounded in good evidence, then they wouldn't have to propagate false news. So the actual scenario that my opponent is proposing is actually very unlikely because the fringe beliefs are unlikely to be true at all in the first place. So for all of these reasons, I urge a vote in affirmation.
All right. So first, I would like to counter my opponent's previous claims about the fake news leading to health crises by giving an example of what if an anti-vaxxer became president or had large political power. They would censor vaccines and it would cause great damage. My opponent did bring up the fact that Trump is currently the president. However, it will not always be this way. However, I contend that the fact that it is this way right now should be greatly concerning if we're giving the government the power to censor fake news. My opponent's second contention was based on the fact that fake news is divisive, and he mentioned that censoring fringe beliefs might be okay if those fringe beliefs are wrong. However, I strongly argue that unity ideologically is really only a good thing if the things they're agreeing on are beneficial toward a society. You could have an entire society that is brainwashed by like a fascist dictator and completely agree with that. There would be no divisiveness. However, that would be completely awful for everybody living there. So I would say that unity is only important and if the agreement is beneficial for everybody, and that a good amount of divisiveness might actually be useful. And I'd also like to bring up that he mentioned that like punishing fringe beliefs might be okay because they may often be harmful or wrong. However, like if government ever were to get to a point where it's like large enough to and off in a way to do dangerous things, it would be the fringe people standing up for what is truly beneficial for humanity, and those beliefs should not be punished. So I would like to strengthen my contention that government deciding what is and is not fake news is dangerous by also expanding that it, people oftentimes disagree on how to come to truth and how to believe truth. And so like an entire philosophical argument would need to be made for how things are decided to be true and why the government should be applying that. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to touch upon the two issues in this debate, which is first, the enforcement of this policy, and second, the nature of fringe beliefs. So in my opponent's speech, he brought up a hypothetical where the whole government is run by anti-vaxxers, and then as a result, all vaccine stuff gets censored. However, we have to realize that this hypothetical is only possible if we negate the resolution. If we allow fake news to spread, then the amount of people that believe this is only going to increase, and that is the only scenario where you would get a large amount of people who believe in anti-vax running the government. So if you don't want the anti-vax people running the government or having power over you at all, then you should actually affirm the resolution. And then secondly, I would like to quickly reiterate the nature of fringe beliefs. If these fringe beliefs were based on good arguments, if they were based on the evidence, then they wouldn't be fringe beliefs, they would be mainstream because they would be more true. So by the very nature of these fringe beliefs, they are very unlikely to be true at all and thus can be censored under a more strict definition of fake news. And for these two reasons, I urge a vote in affirmation.
Okay. As attributed quote long ago, a famous quote is, "I disapprove of what you say, but I defend to death the right for you to say it." Giving government the ability to decide what is and is not considered true or false facts is already given in terms of things like persecution of crimes. However, if we let this go into speech, this could be very deadly. And I would like to address my opponent's points of this leading to health crises. And I'll give a hypothetical. What if anti-vaxxers were correct? Currently stopping this information and giving the government the power to do so would be incredibly harmful to all of society if they were correct. I would also like to bring up that my opponent dropped his contention about divisiveness, and that divisiveness can actually be helpful in a society where the mainstream beliefs are dangerous and damaging to society. For those reasons, you should vote in opposition.
All right, good debate.